You must release her. She is under my protection now. That is not your choice to make.
The rancher had seen fear before, but never like this. Just before sunset, an Apache girl burst through his ranch gate, covered in dust, trembling, and clutching a torn leather pouch to her chest. Behind her, far across the desert, came the sound of horses pounding the earth. Armed riders, getting closer every second. She begged for only one thing: don't let them take me. The rancher knew hiding her could start a war. But when he looked into her terrified eyes, he made a choice that would change his life forever. Because the men hunting her were not ordinary outlaws, and the person who arrived looking for the girl before dawn shocked everyone on the ranch. The evening heat still hung over the ranch when Elias Mercer stepped down from the fence line and wiped the sweat from his neck. The desert stretched quiet and wide around him, painted gold by the sinking sun. His horses stood near the water trough without moving much, too tired from the long day to stir. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, something in the air felt wrong. Elias had lived alone on the ranch for 6 years since his wife Clara died from a winter sickness. The silence after her death had changed him. He spoke little, trusted few people, and kept to his work. Most evenings ended the same way. Feed the horses. Check the fences. Eat supper alone. But this evening was different. One of the horses suddenly lifted its head and snorted toward the tree line. Elias turned sharply. At first he saw nothing except drifting dust between the mesquite trees. Then a figure stumbled into view. It was a young Apache girl. She could not have been older than 16. Her dark hair clung to her face with sweat. Her dress was torn along the sleeves and her boots were coated in dry mud. She looked like someone who had been running for days without rest. Before Elias could speak, the girl collapsed beside the trough. He rushed toward her carefully. Years in the territory had taught him that fear could make anyone dangerous. But when the girl looked up at him, he saw no threat in her eyes. Only terror. "Please," she whispered in broken English. "Hide me." Elias frowned. "Who is after you?" The girl glanced behind her toward the open desert. Her breathing shook badly. "Men with guns." Almost on cue, a distant sound rolled across the land. "Horses." Elias stiffened. The girl reached for his sleeve with trembling hands. "Please. They kill me if they find me." Before Elias could answer, his ranch hand Walter came running from the barn. The older man stopped cold when he saw the girl. "Elias," Walter muttered, lowering his voice, "you do not want trouble like this." The sound of riders grew louder. Elias looked down at the frightened girl. She clutched a small leather pouch tightly against her chest as if her life depended on it. "Come with me," he said finally. Walter stared at him in disbelief. "You cannot be serious. Just help me." They hurried the girl toward the barn. Beneath the old storage room sat a narrow root cellar hidden under loose wooden boards. Elias opened it quickly. "You stay quiet," he told her. "No matter what happens." The girl nodded once before disappearing below. Moments later, 6 armed riders thundered into the ranch yard. Dust swirled around them as their horses came to a stop. Their leader sat tall in the saddle, a hard-faced man with pale eyes and a weather-worn coat. "Evening," the rider said calmly. Elias crossed his arms. "Can I help you?" The man studied him for a moment. "Name is Briggs. We are looking for a runaway girl." "I have not seen anyone." Briggs smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "Apache girl. Young. Carrying something that belongs to us." Walter shifted nervously near the barn door. Briggs noticed. His gaze moved slowly across the ranch before settling back on Elias. "Mind if we look around?" Elias stepped forward. "I do." For several long seconds nobody moved. Then one of the riders leaned closer to Briggs and whispered something. Elias caught only a few words. "Found the others near the canyon." Briggs silenced him with a sharp look. That was when Elias knew these men were lying about more than a runaway girl. Briggs pulled lightly on his reins. "If you are hiding her, rancher, you are making a serious mistake." Without another word, the riders turned and disappeared into the darkening desert. But Elias could still feel danger lingering in the air long after they were gone. That night, while carrying food down to the cellar, he noticed flames suddenly rising outside the barn window. The riders had returned. The smell of smoke hit Elias before he reached the barn door. Outside, flames climbed the dry wooden walls faster than rainwater running downhill. Horses screamed in panic from inside their stalls, kicking wildly against the gates. Sparks floated through the dark sky while ranch hands shouted across the yard. "Water buckets!" Walter yelled. "Move before the whole place goes up." Elias grabbed a heavy blanket near the doorway and threw it over his shoulders before rushing into the smoke. Heat burned his face instantly. One terrified horse nearly knocked him to the ground as he forced open the first stall. "Easy now," he muttered, coughing hard. He slapped the horse loose and watched it bolt into the yard. Another stall. Then another. Thick smoke rolled across the ceiling so heavily he could barely see. Suddenly he remembered the girl. Elias pushed toward the storage room at the back of the barn. Burning wood cracked above him as he dropped beside the loose floorboards and pulled them aside. "Naeli!" he shouted. For one terrible second there was no answer. Then her frightened voice rose from below. "I am here. Come up now." She climbed from the cellar, clutching the leather pouch tightly against her chest. Her eyes widened at the fire surrounding them. "The men came back," she whispered. Elias wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. "Stay close to me." A loud crash exploded nearby as part of the roof collapsed behind them. Elias grabbed her arm and rushed through the smoke-filled barn toward the rear exit. They barely escaped before flames swallowed the doorway entirely. Outside, the ranch yard had become chaos. Ranch hands formed lines passing water buckets while frightened animals ran loose across the property. Walter stumbled toward Elias with soot covering his face. "You found her," he said quietly. Elias nodded once. Walter looked toward the burning barn. This was no warning. Those men meant to kill everyone here. Far across the dark fields, riders could be seen disappearing into the desert. Naeli lowered her eyes. "I brought this trouble." "No," Elias replied firmly. "Those men brought it." For the rest of the night they fought the fire until little remained except smoking beams and black ash. By sunrise, the barn was destroyed. Elias stood silently beside the ruins while tired ranch hands rested nearby. Everything he had worked years to build felt broken in a single night. Walter stepped beside him. "You can still hand the girl over," he said carefully. "Maybe they leave the ranch alone after that." Naeli stood several feet away, listening quietly. Elias watched the smoke rise into the pale morning sky. He thought about the fear in her eyes when she arrived. He thought about Briggs and the cold look on his face. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "This does not end by giving them what they want." Later that afternoon, Elias brought Naeli food and clean water inside the small ranch house. She ate slowly, still watching every sound outside as if expecting armed riders to burst through the door at any moment. Finally Elias sat across from her. "You said they would kill you," he said. "Why?" Naeli hesitated before carefully placing the leather pouch onto the table. Inside was a folded map. Elias opened it slowly and frowned. Strange markings covered the paper along with drawings of rivers, mountains, and land routes across Apache territory. Then he noticed something else. Gold markings. Naeli looked directly at him. "Men kill many people for this map." Elias stared at the map for a long moment without speaking. The paper looked old and worn from years of folding. Strange symbols marked the mountain regions west of the territory, but it was the gold-colored circles that caught his attention most. Some areas had been crossed out heavily in ink as if someone had tried to hide their meaning. "You are telling me men burned my barn over this?" Elias asked quietly. Naeli nodded. "Not only the barn." Her voice carried a sadness far older than her years. She pointed toward one section near the mountains. "Villages here were attacked. Families disappeared. The men searching for me work for powerful people." Elias leaned back in his chair. "What people?" "Railroad men," she answered. "And hunters they pay." The room fell silent except for the crackling sound from the fireplace. Years ago, Elias had worked around railroad crews during the early expansion west. He remembered the greed that followed new land and rumors of gold. Men became dangerous when money entered their minds. Still, something about the story felt unfinished. "How did this map end up with you?" he asked. Naeli lowered her eyes briefly before answering. "My father gave it to me before soldiers attacked our camp." Elias frowned. "Your father is Apache. He is chief of our people." That surprised him. Naeli carefully touched the edge of the map. "My father wanted peace with settlers. He believed people could share the land without killing each other." Her expression darkened. "Many hated him for that. And now, he is gone." The way she said it carried deep fear. Elias stood and walked toward the window. Outside, smoke still drifted from the ruined barn while ranch hands cleared blackened wood from the yard. Everything felt different now. Bigger than one frightened girl running for safety. Behind him, Naeli spoke softly. "My father learned about gold in the mountains. Railroad men wanted the land after they discovered it too. They planned to force our people away before anyone learned the truth." Elias looked back at her. "So Briggs works for them?" "Yes." "And the map proves where the gold is?" Naeli nodded once. A knock suddenly sounded at the front door. Walter stepped inside looking uneasy. "Elias, we found tracks near the North Ridge. Riders watching the ranch." Elias cursed quietly under his breath. "They are waiting," Walter continued. "Sooner or later they will return." Naeli tightened her grip on the pouch. Walter glanced toward her before lowering his voice. "There is something else. Folks in town heard about the fire. Some say we should hand the girl over before more blood gets spilled." Elias felt anger rise in his chest. Easy for them to say from a distance. Walter hesitated. "What are you planning?" Elias looked again at the burned remains of the barn outside. Briggs would not stop now. Neither would the railroad men behind him. Finally Elias made his decision. "We leave before nightfall," he said. Walter blinked. "Leave? Where?" "Naeli says her people are hiding in the mountains." Elias turned toward the girl. "If this map matters that much, then it belongs with them." Naeli looked stunned for a moment. "You would help me?" Elias grabbed his rifle from beside the door. "I already chose sides the moment I hid you in that cellar." Outside, dark clouds slowly gathered over the desert horizon while distant thunder rolled across the land. And somewhere beyond the ranch, Briggs and his riders were waiting. Night settled across the desert as Elias and Naeli rode away from the ranch under a sky filled with cold stars. Walter stood near the gate watching them disappear into the darkness. "You come back alive," the old ranch hand called out. Elias lifted one hand in response but did not slow his horse. The farther they traveled from the ranch, the quieter the world became. Dry wind swept across the open land, carrying dust through the cactus fields and rocky hills. Naeli rode slightly ahead, guiding them through narrow paths invisible to Elias in the dark. By midnight they reached a shallow canyon where they stopped briefly to rest the horses. Elias climbed down slowly, his body aching from the long day and the smoke he had breathed during the fire. Naeli knelt near a small patch of stones and listened carefully to the silence around them. "You hear something?" Elias asked. "No," she whispered. "That is what worries me." Elias understood immediately. Out in the desert, silence often meant danger. He opened a small canteen and handed it to her. Naeli drank carefully before returning it. "You trust me very quickly," she said after a moment. Elias gave a tired shrug. "Maybe I am getting old." A faint smile touched her face for the first time since arriving at the ranch. Then her expression turned serious again. "My father used to say trust is not built in comfort. It is built when people stand in danger together." Elias stared quietly into the darkness ahead. "Your father sounds wiser than most men I have met." Naeli lowered her eyes. "That wisdom made enemies." Before Elias could answer, one of the horses suddenly jerked its head upward and snorted sharply. Both of them froze. Far away, faint lights moved across the hills. Riders! Elias quickly stamped dirt over the small fire they had started. "How many?" Naeli watched the distant lights carefully. At least 6 brigs. She nodded. Within seconds they were back on horseback, moving deeper into the canyon. Loose rocks rolled beneath the horses while shadows swallowed the narrow trail ahead. The riders behind them grew louder with every passing minute. Gunfire suddenly cracked through the night. A bullet struck stone near Elias, sending sharp fragments across his face. "Move!" he shouted. The canyon twisted sharply ahead before opening into a dry riverbed lined with steep walls. Naeli pointed toward a narrow opening partly hidden by brush. "There!" They forced the horses through the gap just as more shots echoed behind them. Hidden beyond the opening stood an abandoned mining shelter built into the rock wall decades earlier. Inside, darkness covered everything except broken tools and old wooden beams. Elias quickly pulled the horses deeper inside, while Naeli covered the entrance with loose brush. The riders thundered past outside only moments later. For several long seconds neither Elias nor Naeli moved. Finally the sound of horses faded into the distance. Elias exhaled slowly. Too close. Naeli sat against the wall, breathing hard. "They will keep following. Then we keep moving." As the night deepened, cold air filled the shelter. Elias noticed Naeli quietly studying him from across the room. "What?" he asked. She hesitated before speaking. "You could still leave me." Elias shook his head immediately. "No." "Why?" The question lingered heavily between them. Elias stared down at his rough hands for a moment before answering. "Years ago my wife believed people deserved help even when helping them came with risk." His voice softened slightly. "I stopped believing that after she died." Naeli listened quietly. "But when you ran onto my ranch," Elias continued, "I saw fear in your eyes no child should carry alone." For a moment the young Apache girl looked close to tears, though she fought hard to hide it. Then she slowly opened the leather pouch again and removed a second folded paper hidden beneath the map. Elias frowned. "What is that?" Naeli handed it to him carefully. It was an old letter written in faded ink. At the bottom sat a name Elias recognized instantly. Clara Mercer. His late wife. Elias felt the world tighten around him as he held the letter. Clara Mercer. His wife. The woman he buried years ago and had never stopped thinking about. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. The ink was faded but still readable. Clara's handwriting filled the page with careful lines. Elias read in silence. The letter spoke about meetings held in secret between Apache leaders and settlers who believed peace was possible. It described land surveys, railroad pressure, and warnings that powerful men were preparing to take control of the mountain routes. Clara wrote that she feared people would be killed to protect what was hidden there. At the bottom of the page, she had added a final warning. "If anything happens to me, protect what the map reveals. It is the only truth they will try to erase." Elias lowered the letter slowly. Naeli watched him carefully. "My father trusted your wife." Elias could not speak at first. All those years of grief suddenly felt different. Not random. Not meaningless. But tied to something larger that had been hidden from him. He finally looked up. "So this is why they killed her." Naeli nodded once. Outside the shelter, distant thunder rolled across the mountains. Elias folded the letter carefully and placed it back in his coat. "Then we finish what she started," he said quietly. Naeli stood beside him, no longer just a frightened girl. Together, they stepped back into the darkness toward the mountains. The first light of dawn slowly touched the edge of the mountains as Elias and Naeli moved forward from the old shelter. The desert behind them felt like a place that no longer belonged to their past. What had started as a desperate escape had become something far heavier, tied to land, truth, and names that would not stay buried. Elias held Clara's letter close in his coat, as if it had finally given him back something he thought was gone forever. Naeli walked beside him in silence, no longer only running from danger, but walking toward what her father had tried to protect. Somewhere ahead, the truth waited in the mountains. And so did the men who would do anything to keep it hidden. The road was still long, and nothing about it would be easy. But for the first time, neither of them was walking alone. If you want to know what happens next, like the video and subscribe for the next part of this story. Comment below and tell me this. Should Elias and Naeli trust the Apache camp, or is there betrayal waiting for them in the mountains?